Today's exercise on day two is to discuss or just to talk about internet here when I travel, and why it's important to me and why I never take any vacation officially outside of the day I got married. And so you know, the background, we'll just start off, is that I really love what I do, and I love solving tough and challenging computer sciencey problems for my two clients, and one of the things that is kind of secretly proud of is that I don't take official vacation. And One of the reasons why I find that this is a fun challenge for me is that it forces me to be able to work in environments where the internet is not optimal or suboptimal. And like live in New York City. I'm lucky enough to live in one of the buildings that has gigabit FiOS. So it's very easy for me to take high bandwidth and unlimited bandwidth for granted. And so every now and then when I travel, I find myself in these situations where we don't have unlimited internet, and it forces me to start thinking about how do I design my systems better so that they can run without me. So 90% of the time they work, and they've gotten better, so we're closer to 99% of the time I don't have any issues. But I remember I was working on what was the first of 7 honeymoons with Becca, and I found that I had to get up at 4 a.m. in the morning in the Philippines to check to go down to the main to go down to the main library of the resort to hop online to check internet, and it's something I've vowed to myself I would never have to do again. And that was because little did we know that while the resort had Wi-Fi, it did not have Wi-Fi in every room. So fast forward a couple years, and here we are now at the Lizard Island Resort here on Lizard Island, which is about 150 miles off the coast of Australia. Becca and I are here for diving. So we're diving the Great Barrier Reef. We had an outer reef dive today. And it was spectacular. We had turtles and sharks, and something we didn't expect to see was manta ray, and also these giant cod. They had to have been bigger than me. Anyway, back to internet here. Because Lizard Island is 150 miles off the coast of Australia, we can't just get internet to go over cellular. Cellular signals don't reach this far, and so the only choice if you're at a remote location like this is satellite internet. And so what a resort like Lizard Island will do is they'll get satellite internet set up, and it's shared for the entire resort, and it can be really expensive, thousands of dollars a month, just to provide internet, and it's not great. It's for the entire resort, it's probably slower than my parents' cable modem when I got back from college. So at most maybe 10 megabits per second, shared for the entire resort, and that compares to, I would say, we have just at home easily, since we have gigabit internet. I definitely have seen speed tests of up to 800 megabits per second, so it's lightning fast, and it's just ours. But here on Lizard Island is shared, and so what I do usually when I arrive into a place like this is I'll just start running this like audit to see like what I can access and what I can't, and start to figure out like ways to get around their systems. So one of the first things we noticed was that we couldn't send photos out, and they're like you can already see like it's gorgeous behind me in the bay, and we tried to send photos out to like our parents and a couple friends, and noticed that anything like we could send iMessage text, but we couldn't send the photos. And I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. But over the past few days, I've come to realize that the resort is actually blocking all iCloud traffic. And why they would do that is because like every iPhone is set up now to back up like all of your photos into iCloud. And if you imagine, like if you're taking like a couple dozen photos, and especially even if you're taking a group photo or a selfie, and you have like, you know, 14 like trial shots of yourself, all 14 of those are getting backed up into the cloud. And like if everybody has an iPhone and they're all taking photos and everything's getting back to the cloud, now all of a sudden like we have all of this traffic going to iCloud trying to back up photos that nobody's ever going to look at again, because really like the photos where you're blinking or you have that really weird scrunched face, I mean, you're never going to want to see that again, but it's taking up bandwidth and it's backing up. Meanwhile, some people are trying to check email. Some people are just trying to see what's going on in the news, and they can't get online because too many phones are backing up. So what a resort will do is they'll, or their IT department or satellite provider, whoever's configuring the network, will block all of iCloud traffic. And so we discovered that while iCloud was blocked, we were still able to send messages out over like Facebook Messenger. So it does look like there are some alternatives that work. That's one example of kind of like getting around the system. If you can't send messages through iCloud, you might be able to send it through Messenger, and if not, WhatsApp or Skype or one of the many messaging services. Then the next challenge that I had was that I have a server in Virginia at the Amazon Web Services data center there, and that coordinates like a whole bunch of the data processes I use for my hedge fund client. So it's obviously very important that I'm actually able to connect to it. And I noticed that I was like having no success. Like I could go online, I could check, I could go to many websites, but I could not get to this one server over SSH, which is the Secure Shell protocol. Now, the thing about protocols is that they're usually mapped to specific, what we call well-known ports. So a server can have many different services and ports. So many services that are each on their own port. So what you'll find is that the well-known port, as we would call it, for HTTP, which you've probably seen with websites, which is HTTP or the Hypertext Transfer Protocol goes over port 80. And then if you go look at like HTTPS, and that's the secure version that's encrypted, that goes over 443. And Secure Shell by default goes over port 22. And so I was noticing that I'm able to get to like secure websites, but I can't get to my server because they're blocking port 22. Now I gave an talking about why like they might block iCloud. So at that point they're just blocking those servers altogether. But in the case of port 22, the reason they would block that is because like people can hack into a computer here, and now you have like a Nigerian prince sending like emails from 150 miles off of the coast of Australia, or there could be a whole bunch of other nefarious activity. But the big thing is that you don't you don't want to, if you're the resort, you don't want like your bandwidth, your precious bandwidth, being wasted or being stolen by people who've hacked into a computer. So one of the ways they prevent that is they block um, services like Secure Shell over port 22. And so the solution here was that instead of trying to get their IT department to open port 22 on the router so that I could connect to my server on port 22, I was able to connect to a Windows server over the web, and then manually and very slowly, I might add, edit the file through Windows connected to Secure Shell. I was able to get the SSH server to add port 443 in addition to port 22. And the reason why this was a clever little hack was that we knew I knew that HTTPS traffic, which is encrypted, was going through fine, but port 22 traffic was blocked. So my little clever solution was to get my server to also listen in on port 443. So in the end, the router here at the resort is thinking that I'm trying to connect to a remote website when really I'm connecting to my server. And that got through beautifully, and I can even show proof right here. It looks like gibberish, but you can kind of see. If the focus lock is there we go. You can see that I'm able to get to the server, and that brings me a lot of joy, because I think, like a lot of things in computer science, are really puzzles. And that's like being able to access something that ordinarily I shouldn't be able to access it's a fun and cool skill that I've developed over time and with experience. And what this means is I can see what's going on and trigger things, and set up my processes and potentially debug something that's broken. So that's about it. That's my little introduction to hacking from a resort 150 miles off the coast of Australia. Lila, I hope you appreciated this little tutorial or video, and we'll see you tomorrow.